Good evening. We have here two Liberals, Mr Frank Byers, the Vice President of the Liberal Party, who was a member of the House of Commons and Chief Liberal Whip, and Mr John Arlott, so well known to radio audiences, who at this moment is the Liberal candidate for the Epping division. And there are two others, Mr and Mrs Geoffrey Hastings. He is a businessman, she a housewife, and other things as well. They are meant to be, and I hope that they are, typical independent-minded voters. Both of them, I grieve to say, have usually voted Conservative. What questions they will put, I have no idea, for this broadcast is unscripted and unrehearsed. I will ask Mr Hastings to put his first question.
Thank you, Lord Premier. Now, as I don't think the Liberals have a chance of getting in at the next election, why have you got so many candidates in the field of battle?
Well, I think I detect a certain amount of conservative bitterness in that question, if I may say so, but quite obviously that criticism was also levelled at the Labour Party 50 years ago. We feel that there are many people in this country who want to vote for something in which they believe, and therefore the local constituency associations have put up Liberal candidates. I personally wish that there were many more of them, and I think you would agree with me that 3 or 4 million Liberals in this country to be only represented by 6 members of Parliament is not really a fair share. I think there are quite a number of other things which one can say. What we're really trying to demonstrate, as many of us believe, is that the Conservative and Labour parties have more in common with one another than they have with, or than we have with either of them. What we're trying to do at this election is two things. We're trying to get a substantial increase in the Liberal vote in every seat we fight, primarily to encourage those many millions of people who say we would vote Liberal if only we thought the Liberals had a chance. Now, the next time they may be able to come in and take their courage in both hands and vote for us. The second thing we want to do is to get more Liberal members in the House, because the Liberal Party today is the only independent party. And you've seen the power of the party machines, the power which is exercised, in which members of Parliament are threatened by expulsion. Now, the Liberal in the House of Commons can vote and speak as his conscience dictates, and he can represent the millions of small people, individuals, who are independent-minded too. And I think that's a good enough reason for putting up candidates. If it's any consolation to you, Mr Hastings, we propose to win seats from both Conservative and Labour.
Mrs Hastings?
Well, I'm not politically minded, but I've 2 children, and I want to see them grow up without the fear of the hydrogen bomb over their heads. Now, have the Liberals any solution to that?
Well, every party wants peace. We believe that just to tackle the hydrogen bomb is like trying to treat measles by putting ointment on the largest spot. We think that war is the evil and the entire evil. We don't think one-sided disarmament would help. We think that to give up making the hydrogen bomb and shelter behind our ally America having it is a disgraceful thing to dream of. And we fear that if the hydrogen bomb is outlawed and war does start, neither side would refrain from using it. We think, with the United Nations Charter, that war begins in the minds of men, and that's where we believe we must tackle it. That's why we advocated so long ago this unity with France and Germany, 7 years before Sir Anthony Eden went at last to Paris and did it at the last moment, having sacrificed the goodwill that there would have been if only we'd done it generously those 7 years ago. The Liberals, again, were the people who advocated recognizing the Chinese Communist government, because we believe you must talk to your enemies as well as your friends if you're going to have peace. That's why we want to attack the problem of want. We want to stop war where it starts, not when it's gone as far as the hydrogen bomb being poised. And we believe that's the only real way to do it.
Well, I'd like to ask you now about the wave of industrial unrest and the unofficial strikes. I think we all acknowledge the fact that everyone has the right to strike, but what about the right not to strike? And how do the Liberals view this position at the moment?
Well, I think this is a very difficult and a very worrying problem. And I wouldn't say that the Liberal Party has got all the answers to it. I don't think any party's got all the answers to it. And I think we've got to do a great deal of deep thinking. But I would say that there are two main types of strike at the present moment. There's the strike for higher wages, and there are the strikes which arise from disputes between different unions.
Yes.
Now, on the first one, higher wages, I'm quite convinced that we've got to overhaul the whole of our industrial system. It'll take a long time. But if we could get adopted on a much wider basis the principles, for instance, of sharing profits, of co-ownership, of co-partnership, and give the workers a real, genuine interest in the enterprise in which they're engaged, then they wouldn't have nearly so much reason for striking. And moreover, they would be getting a just reward for their effort. The second thing is this. I believe we've got to get away in the future from these mass wage awards, these mass wage demands. 80,000 men claiming another 4 shillings a week. Because when you award that money, you're giving the same increase to the slacker as to the hard worker and the efficient chap and the skillful fellow. And I believe that if you get a juster system of rewarding labour, you'll have far fewer strikes. The other type of strike must inevitably be dealt with by the Trade Union Council, the TUC. They are the people. And I think they've got to assert their authority. I would not be in favour of legislation in the House of Commons. But I think the TUC have got to assert their authority over their own members. And the main thing is to get applied the liberal principle of recognising that if you're merely going out to promote your own selfish sectional interests, you're going to do it at the expense of the whole community of which you're a member. In other words, if these things go on, we're going to impoverish everybody.
Might I add to that, Frank, that this co-ownership policy is already working and working successfully in big firms in this country that don't get strikes and have got workers and their bosses pulling together. And to emphasise Frank's point, the thing we're distressed at is this sense that the Conservative Party represents the bosses and the Labour Party the workers. We think that a genuine British government represents both classes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hastings, would you like to add anything?
Yes, sometimes. I've been housekeeping since 1940, and since that time my weekly expenditure has gone up for much more than twice. Do you think that any party has the solution to fight this rising cost of the housewife's weekly bill?
Well, I don't know, but all I do know is that we're all in this. It's no use just looking to the government to reduce the cost of living. Every one of us has got a responsibility. Now, if you are going to reduce the cost of living, the first thing I think we've got to look at is what keeps prices up. Now, there are several things. First of all, as you know as a businessman, there are these agreements, and there are many of them, between producers and manufacturers, which keep prices at an artificially high level. Now, the Conservative Party can't tackle that problem with real vigour, because they would have to attack the very interests from which they draw a lot of their support. I think that's a fact. But those aren't the only restrictive practices. You've got the same type of restrictive practices among the workers. You've got a lot of trade union rules. You've got the refusal to accept new ideas and new machinery, and probably above all, you've got these tremendous demands for higher wages without there being any increase in production, efficiency, or productivity. Now, those are the things which, again, are keeping prices up. But the Labour Party can't or won't tackle those problems because they're too close to the trade unions from which they draw their support. You've got a lot of other things. You've got protection. You've got, it seems to be the thing now, for any section of industry which gets into difficulties to rush to the government for help and assistance. I don't believe that's in keeping with the British character. If Don Cockle had gone to the referee every time he was hit, we certainly wouldn't have a good reputation in the United States. What we've got to do is to realize that we've got to compete in the world and put our industries into efficient working order so that we can compete. And all of us have got a responsibility in this. But I do say that more Liberals in the House of Commons would enable us to keep these ideas in front of the House where other members of other parties can't or daren't put them forward, because there's some unpopular things which have got to be said.
And